breaths together. We're gonna go in through the nose, and I want you to draw out the out breath really slow, like we're blowing a candle out. So it's gonna be in through the nose, out through the mouth. The longer you can draw out the out breath, then the more we're gonna be able to calm the nervous system. This is for you, but it's also for me. Okay, let's go in with the inhale. And exhale. Let's do that one more time. Inhale. And exhale. One last time. Inhale. Kate's got t-shirts over there. This is really just an hour-long t-shirt commercial. I appreciate you all coming out tonight. This is beautiful. It's a great spot. I am Ambroz. I'm a Psychedelic Integration Coach, which means I help people prepare for psychedelic trips, and then I help them afterwards, and sometimes I'm involved in the facilitating of the actual trip. I work with a lot of comedians, and attorneys, and veterans. They all have about the same level of PTSD. So it's kind of similar vibes working with those groups. I'd like to start by kind of telling you a little bit about my story and how I got involved in integration. I grew up in a very abusive household, and it's hard to say where the start of this abuse was because it went back generation upon generations. I had a baby by the time I was 19. I was out of the house by the time I was 15. I was addicted to opiates by the time I was about 23. It snowballed pretty quick. I lived on the streets. Heavy opiate addiction. This was 15 years ago, and my addiction was $150 a day. It was very expensive. I found myself very lost and not knowing how to conquer these attachments I had to so many things, from nicotine to opiates to any drug I could get a hold of pretty much. And I turned to DMT to help me with those addictions. And it worked. DMT is a very powerful psychedelic. It only lasts about 15 minutes. And it did work. This was about 6 years ago, and it got me off the opiates and got me to get my life together for a while, but I did not integrate very well, so it didn't last. I still had some problems with craving and wanting to go back to that kind of life and that kind of environment and kill whatever pain or trauma I could. I was able to stay sober though, and in 2021, after years of sobriety, I lost my fiance to a fentanyl overdose. And then I lost the closest person I ever had to a mother, my aunt, to cancer, and I lost my best friend from childhood to an opiate overdose as well, and this was all in a few months, and I really lost my mind. I didn't go back to using opiates, but it really was just a cycle of insanity. At the time, I was interning for a very high-profile attorney, and I would show up at the office every day in black sweatpants and a black sweatshirt, and I would nap on his couch while he was literally in like business meetings and in court on Zoom. And I would just be napping in the background. I was very, very depressed. I didn't care. I saw him as a man in a suit, and I didn't really care what he thought because I wasn't looking for a job. I just found safety at the law office because it seemed very stable. And so I would go there every day and I would just sleep. I would show up to yoga. I would still go every day because I knew I had to, and I would just sleep on the mat. And it's a little pro trick. The teachers won't stop you from just going and taking naps in yoga classes. They're pretty cool about it. Something I didn't know about my attorney, though, as he sat there so cool with it, me sleeping on his couch, and slowly blankets and pillows would kind of show up at the office and other comfort items. And I was still thinking, oh, this stuffy suit. Like he doesn't know nothing from nothing. It went on like that. And then one day he's like, I want you to meet me in Miami, and we're going to Key West for a business conference. And I showed up in Miami, and there was about a 1/4 pound of mushrooms there. There was a lot of people there. It was a big legal conference, so I can't really say how these mushrooms appeared. And it turns out my attorney had been a yoga instructor all through grad school, and he had studied things like telepathy and remote viewing, and he really ended up being a very strange man. And the first night in Key West, all the attorneys were drinking, and I didn't really drink at the time because I was grieving so heavily. I thought if I drank, either one, I'd never be able to stop because it would feel so good, and it would be such a nice escape. Or two, I would just be the sad, crying, drunk girl. So I just avoided drinking or any kind of escapism in my extreme state of grief. So they were all drinking, and I sat there on a couch with this giant bag of mushrooms, and I just ate it like popcorn. And the mushrooms started to kick in, and I noticed I was still eating mushrooms while they kicked in, and this is a scary spot to be in, because this means I had been eating mushrooms for at least an hour. If I had to guess, I ate about 10 grams of mushrooms that night. I went to another place, and it completely broke my brain wide open, and the next week I spent, the experiment was to eat mushrooms every 15 minutes for a week straight. I'm not recommending this. It was pretty insane, and it was pretty intense. But what I realized during this time, and it's difficult to do, because doing mushrooms every 15 minutes would require you understanding how clocks work, which is kind of hard to do when you're eating that many mushrooms. So I started to, as I was on this week-long trip in Key West, surrounded by chickens and a bunch of attorneys and people in suits, just tripping my mind out, I started to realize things weren't quite how I thought they were. And perhaps this is more of a stage than we believe, or that we can perceive. And we're all just kind of actors here, and we have a lot more control over our destiny, or regardless of grief state, or regardless of outside situations, we have quite a bit of control over what our future holds, and we can play any part that we want. I got back home. It didn't seem to stick with me. It did. I just got very sick when I got home. Partying like that, you can, get a little sick afterwards. So I was sick for a few weeks, and then it was New Year's Eve, and I took some LSD, and I went to a local warehouse, and I was standing there watching the man on stage count down to midnight. and everyone getting all excited over this countdown and just waiting for something to happen at midnight. And the guy on the stage, I was calling him the clock commander all night. The clock commander got to 0 and it was midnight and everybody was celebrating, and I was in the back laughing so hard in tears because nothing was actually fucking happening, and everybody thought like it meant something, like the time meant something. And I realized that perhaps we're the ones that have control over when the new year is, and when we start to heal, and when we start to really jump into life again. And so the next day I signed up for an outpatient program that focused on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is based in the philosophy of Stoicism, which deals with triggers and reactions and emotional outlet, and not necessarily stuffing our emotions, but more having a better control over how and when they come out, and how we use the energy of our emotions, how we transmute them, and how we use alchemy to make them something important. And through going to this outpatient program, I started to notice all the things that were helping me integrate the psychedelic trip. And things like yoga, meditation, talk therapy, detoxes, all sorts of things. So I kind of found that the combination of psychedelics and these other modalities is what it takes to make the lasting effects of psychedelics. Because a lot of us are doing psychedelics and not realizing there's these other things we can do to make the effects of the psychedelics last a little longer. And so that's just a short of how I kind of got into this. It was really my own trauma and my own addictions. And that sent me searching, and then realizing how powerful it actually is, because I'm now in a place I don't crave anything. Like, it's unbelievable to the person I used to be. Like, not a thing. Like, it's really it's a different world once the hungry ghost goes away, which can stick around quite some time, but it is possible to heal that. I wanted to kind of go over what it is that I do in psychedelic integration. I help people prepare for a trip, and how I recommend people do this is gather information. Gather as much information as you can, because if you come to me and I'm your coach, I'm never going to tell you what to do, because I think everybody knows what to do. It's just up to them to tap into it. So I'm gonna more help people move into what they wanna be, or move towards what they think the best healing modality is. So research is the best first step, is gather all the information you can on which medicine works best for what you're looking for. And there's articles all over. Like now CNN and MSNBC, like this is mainstream stuff now, will tell you, which works best for depression, PTSD, anxiety, addictions and attachments, all of that kind of things. I am a spiritualist, so as I do know the research, I'm not the research person. I did go to school and study psychology and philosophy, but I ended up enjoying the philosophy a little bit more and enjoying the spiritual side of things. And I think it is something we're lacking a lot of now that we're moving this into a clinical space. I think it's being dismissed a lot, that, this is a spiritual thing, and it's a healing thing that's beyond anything that science can explain. I think it's best when you're preparing to involve your doctors and therapists, though, but I want you to be wary that if your doctors and therapists don't see any benefits in psychedelics at all, and aren't even willing to discuss them with you, and only willing to discuss pharmaceuticals, you may want to talk to other doctors and therapists, because what this means, if they're not willing to, it means they're behind research in their own field. It means they don't even know their own job, because this is where the industry is going, even in the clinical side. So if they're not for it, they haven't read the research. And so that's an ill-informed medical professional. So that's scary on multiple levels, not just on the psychedelic level. When you go into this, when you go into a psychedelic trip, understand that it's work. And what psychedelics do is they bring things to the surface. So they're going to reveal all these things to you, and it's really up to you what you do about it and how you integrate those lessons into your life. It's not a one-trip fix. And because I've seen many people do psychedelics and the effects were not lasting at all, and they hardly got any healing. They got a little bit, they got the initial spark, and that can last a while. There can be a pink cloud, but unless you're doing the work, the spiritual, the physical, and the mental work, then it's not gonna last very long. I would personally try best to find the legal route to do it. Laws are changing all the time. So hopefully we'll have more access here in the US, but there are definitely retreats all over the world you can go to, and I even refer people, and I even show up to retreats and I do stuff like that too. I know some great facilitators, so I am willing to refer out that way. I also suggest a few weeks before a trip, if you're not a meditator, get into mindfulness meditation, which is simply the practice of sitting for 5 minutes, even just 5 minutes, in silence, with your eyes closed, and every time a thought arises, label it as thinking and let it pass. This has many uses for the psychedelic trip. A, if you can't sit with your own thoughts for 5 minutes without psychedelics involved, you might be in a little bit of trouble once the psychedelics kick in. Another thing is, if you're used to labeling your thoughts as thinking and letting them pass, eventually when you are tripping, you do this enough and you'll start doing it to day-to-day life. You know, you'll start having a bad thought just while walking down the street and you'll label it as thinking and let it pass, because we are not our thoughts. So when you're tripping, the bad trip comes up, the bad thoughts come up, you label it as thinking and let it pass. The messages are important. We let it pass in a way where we note it, where we realize it. We're not just letting it pass and forgetting it. We're saying, okay, I hear you, next. The psychedelics can have, the psychedelics will never demand anything of you on a trip. That's the ego. So if the psychedelics are yelling at you, go break up with so-and-so, go get married, go quit your job, do all this, it's more pointing out things to think about. I wouldn't be making phone calls on psychedelics to your boss. Another important step in preparation is setting intentions. This isn't expectations, not what you think is going to happen. This is what you would like to happen. Think about the kind of things that you like about yourself and how you'd like to strengthen those things. Think about the kind of things you don't like about yourself and how you'd like to release those things. A lot of people watch their diets before psychedelic trips. Sometimes it's good to do some fasting. And for me, I'm not a big faster. I'm more big on eating fresh foods and, from the ground. That would mean, fruits, vegetables, nuts, all of that kind of stuff. It's really good for you, seeds. I don't know enough about fasting to be like, you need to fast. You need to physically be prepared, mostly with the doctor. Talk to your doctor about this. Find out where the contraindications are. With medicines, with all of that kind of stuff, there's certain kind of medications that will not let you take psychedelics. There's antipsychotics, there's SRIs, there's just all sorts of different medicines that interact. Again, this is why you want your doctor to be on board, or to have a doctor who's on board or willing to at least talk to you and work with you through the process. Get used to being uncomfortable. Ice baths work good for that. Start getting into your body by paying attention to the pains you feel. I like to, when my lower back hurts, I ask myself, what emotion am I avoiding? And usually it starts to dissipate a little bit if I can figure out what emotion I'm avoiding. spiritual preparation, like I already mentioned, meditation. If you're not into God or spirituality a lot, I would just stay open to the idea that there's bigger things at play. You don't have to call it God, or there's obviously some energies here that we don't really have control over, and that kind of, yeah, I think there's something a little bigger, but I understand not everybody does, but I would go into this with a very open mind. Explore questions you have with yourself about purpose and meaning in life. Maybe explore your values so you can determine what are maladaptive thoughts. So if you know your goals and values, like if you have a goal and any thought or action that does not take you towards that goal is maladaptive. So it's good to shift through your thoughts in that manner. Make sure your house is clean when you return home. Because after you trip, if you're tripping at your house, you're going to notice that you're the messiest person that ever lived. And so I would recommend, having at least your room clean and stuff. I would have some essential oils and candles. And this is for afterwards, too. You're going to want to go home to a nice, comfortable place. It's like going home from vacation with a sink full of dishes. Like, it's not a good time. So we want to take care of those things. Let's see. Relationships, I would talk to your loved ones, and tell them about what you're about to go under if you think they're supportive and stuff. You don't have to tell everyone if you don't think they're supportive, or if they're gonna, shun this kind of thing and make you question your own values, then I would leave them out of the process until it's fully integrated, and then you can share your story and they won't be able to question it. So all in all, now the integration part. Integration is how we incorporate the psychedelic experience into our day-to-day life. The lessons and insights can far outlast the actual trip through presence, mindfulness, lifestyle changes. Psychedelics are just the seed, and really it's how we water the seed that we're going to see what sprouts out of it. Integration can help us find meaning in uncomfortable places, like a psychedelic trip. It can help us better explore what exactly we experienced and look at it from an outside view. The process of information is we receive information through thoughts, sight, feelings, and intuition. We evaluate the information by trying to find meaning and insight. Then we have to take action on the insight. That's the most important part right there, is we have to take action. And these actions can be so small. They can be so small. Maybe the action is brushing your hair every day, or making your bed in the morning, or if we're just learning how to start new habits, sometimes I recommend clients go and take a cup of water. Just fill the cup of water in the sink, just about that much every morning, and then dump it into the sink, just to get used to doing one action. It can be hard to build habits. Mental integration, examine your thought patterns, belief systems, and denials. You have to learn to question your own thoughts, because we are not our thoughts. And once you start changing your thoughts, you'll realize how much you are not your thoughts. So anytime I have a thought pop into my head, I question it. Is it true? Is it real? Does it suit my values? Does it suit who I want to be? Does it suit who I'm trying to be? Emotional, this is my favorite. Emotional integration, obviously with the CBT. The fun part about being a philosophy major is I may not be allowed to be a practitioner of cognitive behavioral therapy, but I am allowed to teach Stoicism, which is the same thing. So once you learn that all these therapies that the therapists are giving out are actually old philosophical thought systems, then you're allowed to teach them suddenly. So it's kind of it's a cool little knowledge to have. So with emotional integration, what we're going to want to do is pay close attention to our triggers, to anything at all that You know, you'll get to know when someone says something, when it makes your heart jump a little bit, or the tiny little signs in you of what's triggering you, so you can get closer to. And I would never say avoid triggers. I know some programs teach to avoid triggers, but I like shadow work, so I say dive into the triggers and explore them when you find them. I'm not a, I am a love and light chick, but I think the light's the brightest in the dark. You know, we drive out to the middle of the desert to look at the stars in the dark. And I like to say to clients, I know we want healing to be meditating on a beautiful beach somewhere. And we are gonna go meditate on the beach. But the path to the beach is a little fucked up. And then once you get to the beach, it's a little fucked up too. More about spirituality. If you're into the kind of things, you know, explore your church, your temple, meditation, perform banishing rituals on your ex-lovers. I don't know how that made it in here. I don't suggest banishing rituals. If you get witchy enough, you don't even have to do them. You'll just someone will screw you over and you're like, oh fuck. You feel so bad for them. You're just ready for lightning to hit them. You're like, oh please don't. No. Here's some philosophical questions to help integrate. What do you value? What is important to you? Did the medicine give you any take-home instructions or homework? What imagery was present during the trip? What themes were present during the trip? What sounds and physical sensations did you hear and feel? What memory stands out most for you? What have you learned about yourself through this experience? Now, writing works really good for this, and there's many reasons for this, but the number one reason I find is, if anybody here is a Ram Dass fan, he talks about this concept of developing the witness. And this is hovering your consciousness above the situation and watching it from the outside and kind of leaving your emotional attachments out of it. It's kind of like if you were doing it right now, or if I was doing it, I'd be looking from above and I'd say, okay, there's a woman talking on stage. She says a lot. She uses her hands. She sits cross-legged for an obscene amount of time. I wonder if her foot's asleep. You know, so you kind of watch from the outside. So writing is good for this because it gets you to practice watching things from the outside. Because if you're the narrator and you're writing about the experience, then you're actually watching the experience from the outside and seeing it that way. And the more you get to do this, the better view you can have of your triggers and such. Music, art, and comedy, all great for integration. I think comedy is highly underrated as a form of expansion of consciousness. I think it's a very important art, and I think it's very important to get into things like that. In my grief state, I got really into comedy, and I somehow was adopted by a lot of comedians, and it really helped set me free, being able to laugh at this kind of stuff, specifically Duncan Trussell. I worked with him a little bit, and I met him just through watching Midnight Gospel, and we both had similar grief states. And I contacted, I was like, I have to meet this man, and I did, and we became friends, and it's the comedy that really can help us get through all of this. Flow arts, moving, somatic movement. I'm sure some of you guys saw me moving really weird before I got on stage here. Yoga, sweat lodges, so all the things that everyone knows all of these kind of things. Everyone knows these integration steps. I'm just reminding everyone of what they are, what these tools are. And take your time in all of this. There's really no rush in integration, and there's peaks and valleys, and there's definitely a pink cloud after you come out of a psychedelic trip, and then there's almost the guaranteed dark night of the soul, which is a place where you've left your old life behind, and your new one hasn't quite arrived yet. And it can be a really scary part that makes you really question getting into psychedelic healing and this kind of path that's kind of off the main path, because it is very lonely at times. It can be very lonely until all your people show up, and a lot of people in this room, like, this is where you find your people, and rooms like this is where change happens. I spend a lot of time at the Capitol and sitting in front of suits with other attorneys, and I find more change in rooms like this than when we're at a bill hearing, because this is the real stuff. This is how revolutions happen, in small rooms, in small meetings. So attending things like this and finding the others, I think is probably one of the best methods. And they'll show up. Your people will show up if you haven't found them yet. They're somewhere. And you think if there's anything else, yoga, meditation, art, some kind of talk therapy. I recommend coaches, not just because I am one, but because, like I said, we have this new clinical route coming up, and what we're going to have is we're going to have professional therapists who are helping people with drug trips, and they are, that part shouldn't have been quotes, and they are helping people, but many of them have never been on a drug trip in their life. They don't have psychedelic knowledge. They don't have knowledge of psychedelic space. So I would consider working with spiritualists and that kind of people, because you're gonna find more people with direct knowledge on specifically psychedelics. And there will be some therapists out there who actually have experience and aren't just jumping on board with the trend, but it's more likely to, right now, to head towards the spiritualists. And I wish I could better explain to you the type of self-love and authenticity that emerges from this kind of work. When dealing with addictions and attachments, a common thing we do wrong in this society is we quit our addictions and we run from our attachments, and that's just another attachment. It's easier to run towards something than run away from something. And Ram Dass again says, I'm just a big Ram Dass girl. He says, don't worry about your addictions, start the spiritual work, and your attachments will fade away. And that, I had to quit opiates. I had to quit and I had to white knuckle, but with cigarettes, during my grief, I was smoking 2 packs a day sometimes. And the way I quit those is I stopped buying them. I just kind of got, they just went away eventually when I started doing enough work. I don't know if I just didn't want to show up to yoga smelling like cigarettes or what, but once you start doing the other work, everything else will just kind of come off in layers. So don't stress yourself about any attachments or addictions that you have right now. Just get into the work, get into your spirituality, and I think we can all move towards something a little better. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm happy to take questions too. Yes.
Question. First of all, thanks for sharing your story. It's really awesome. Great story. Your whole path. You talked about the preparation part. You recommended people do a lot of research. Research. Do you think there's a point where there's too much research? And I mean that in terms of, I was talking to somebody a few months ago, and they were going to be doing, I think it was MDMA for the first time, and they were talking a little bit about it. And he's like, oh, I heard that people at MDMA, they start to listen to hear music differently. Oh, I heard people at MDMA do this. I heard that people at MDMA do this, do that. Like, it's good, but have your own experience. It only seems like you can do too much. You can always create this whole vision of what it's supposed to be, and then it can really distort what your experience is.
Yeah, because that does lead to expectations, right? We kind of want to go in clean slate without expectations. And Yeah, I think there's definitely such a thing as too much research and too much planning. A lot of times if we overplan things, we just never do it. I'd be careful where everyone's getting the research. If you can find one person or a couple people you trust, sometimes it's best to get information from one or two sources so it's all intertwined with each other. But fact check people. But yeah, I would definitely not expect anything when going into psychedelics, and maybe it'd be less reading about people's experiences and stick to general research, like scientific research, like what does MDMA help with? Yeah, not what music should I listen to, what, because that can get complicated if you're trying to hour by hour, I'm gonna play this movie, I'm gonna, watch lights at that time. Yeah, I agree. Any other questions?
I had a question.
Yes.
So you said that I'm a big fan of philosophy myself.
Yeah.
And I'm also studying psychology. So your comparison between CBT and Stoicism was interesting to me. I'm just curious if you could kind of parse that out a little more. How do you mean they're the same? Because I understand kind of, but not really.
Yeah. CBT is actually based on Stoicism. Like that's where they started. That's kind of where they started the. That's kind of the thought system that led to CBT. Stoicism was. So CBT has a lot to do with triggers, responses, and actions. So the triggers lead to your thoughts, the thought and emotions, and that leads to the action. So as you see, like Stoicism is about the same kind of thing, right? Like it's about, you're gonna have these triggers, what do you do with the emotional response? Not necessarily stuff it, but how do you let it out in a more healthy way or at a more healthy time?
Okay, yeah. No, I agree, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. But the Stoics weren't quite known for doing that. They more just stuffed it. That's it.
I think so. I think it depends on. I think it depends. I think that's a very generalized view of Stoicism. I don't think anybody stuffs their emotions, which may be a personal belief. I think that it comes out no matter what. Feelings want to be felt. And so if we don't feel them ourselves, someone around us is going to feel them. Our children are going to feel them. We're going to feel them at inappropriate times.
Well, that's why Stoicism is so powerful.
Yes, yeah, but I don't think Stoics are stuffing them. I think what they're doing is letting them out as in different ways. But yeah, I agree with you. That
Fair
is,
enough.
Yeah.
What does CBT mean?
Cognitive behavioral therapy. Yes, Kate?
What is your favorite psychedelic to work with and why?
I think it depends a lot on who I'm working with. On a personal level, I love LSD. I love working with LSD, but I'm an intellectual, so I like those mind-opening psychedelics. That's really going to help me get in there and analyze my thoughts and that kind of thing. Mushrooms can be a little unpredictable, but I think they are good to help loosen people. I think DMT is 5-MeO DMT, which I've worked with a little bit with clients, and I think that it's a real good quick. It's a real quick trip, and I think it's a real shock to the system, which can be really great sometimes. I think that can definitely be necessary, but I don't think it's for everyone. I think MDMA is great for PTSD and heart opening and things like that. But personally, I'd like to see more LSD research. That one's kind of far out there, but I'm hoping we'll see that. Yes.
Does it matter how much past usage you've had with these drugs?
Are you talking about like on the daily, like a
Just past usage.
tolerance level thing? Or just like you used them a lot 5 years ago and you're wondering, like that kind of thing?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't really have a long-lasting thing, and it can be, I mean, I used a lot of psychedelics recreationally as a teenager and in my early 20s, and then I went back and used them spiritually, so they really do listen to intention, you know, so just because you've always used them one way and now you want to use them as like a healing modality doesn't mean it's going to lessen the impact or it's going to have a harder time moving towards healing. Thank you. Oh, one more.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you think the benefits of LSD are? Because what you said so far to me has been like my experience with mushrooms as far as like changing my mindset. But yeah, what other benefits do you find?
LSD, I think as someone like myself, I am neurodivergent, so I think LSD has helped me to understand social scenes better and understand connection and communication with people better. When I take LSD and I'm out in a room like this, I better understand what people are trying to, there's something telepathic about LSD. You know, like I can better understand what people are really trying to, like social cues, I can understand that better. I can see more clearly, it kind of lessens brain fog for me. Gives me a lot of insight. I find something very like, more like it's more mathematical, more like, it's so hard to really explain where mushrooms can kind of throw me for a loop sometime. You know, like one minute I'm laughing, then next minute I'm crying. LSD, I'll usually just be laughing all night, you know, or like, yeah.
I've experienced something similar to that, as like mushrooms almost seem like they're taking you on their journey.
Yes.
And you go in and out as waves where, yeah, like acid seemed like it was just straight on one direction. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Mushrooms can be a little interesting, but then also like I don't know if it's just how much experience I've had in each space, you know, so I don't know if it's just because I've had so much experience with LSD, maybe someday mushrooms would be like that for me too. I don't know, but mushrooms kind of scare me after that Key West trip, I'll tell you that. Shit. I had to go to outpatient, so I don't know if I'll be messing with those bad boys.
I always felt like mushrooms are more like riding a surfboard, and LSD's more like riding a skateboard.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
We don't get that.
You don't get it?
No.
Haven't you done both?
No.
Oh, see?
So like you're surfing on the ocean, and the waves are.
A surfboard, just you're just gliding along. You just can kind of, you know, there's no sidewalk cracks. There's none of that nonsense. You know, you don't have to stick in a straight line. Whereas skateboard, you kind of got to go a little bit in a straight line, and every once in a while you get a little, right? So that's what.
That sound effect.
Now you get it, right?
I find mushrooms have a lot more visuals too, but that might have been again the amount I was eating. Whew, that was rough, but
So is that the only? You said that's the only mushroom experience you had, like in the last, I don't know, since you had done it when you were younger.
no, I mean I've entered macro doses of psychedelics about 300 times, probably. Micro doses I don't really know, but yeah, macro dose I've many times.
But you have after that session. You're just a little hesitant.
I have. No, you're right. I have. Yeah, I have. But I don't think I've gone above the 3 gram mark because I think I think I scared myself.
Any idea what the strain was?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't. It was really a fucked up scenario for an intern. I was an intern to be in at a legal conference I mean, I got some pretty, I'll tell one quick one. There was one night I'm doing my mushroom thing. I'm lying on the ground in this house we had rented. This is in Key West. And my attorney comes and stands over me and he just goes, I need you to comb your hair. We're going to a benefit dinner. And I'm laying on the ground and my hair is out to here and my legs up the wall. And I start crying. I'm laughing so hard. And he's just like, oh no, Missy. He's like, you're going to this dinner tonight. And I'm like, oh, fuck. This man combed my hair. He's got me like, he's combing my hair for me and throwing a dress at me. And he's just like, you have to put this on. And I'm like, no, like, what are you? But yeah, I showed up to that event. I had to be carried in. And I think that was the night, yeah, I was carried in like screaming and laughing. And this is literally a dinner with like top attorneys of the country. And here comes the intern, like, what the fuck is going on? But these attorneys used to spend time with Hunter S. Thompson. So they're very accustomed to this kind of obscene behavior.
I was thinking this thing, it sounds like Fear and Loathing in Tampa. Or whatever.
Yeah, Fear and Loathing in Key West.
Yeah, Key West, yeah.
And so, yeah, I remember, another night I lit up a cigarette in a Michelin star restaurant and no one stopped me. And I was tripping balls just sitting there in the nicest restaurant I'd ever been in, smoking my cigarette, and no one stopped me. And I think a part of me was like, when the fuck else are you gonna be able to get this fucking high on psychedelics in public except surrounded by attorneys? Like, this is your time to shine, baby. Like, this is it. I was hot shit. I was hot shit. Any other questions? Thank you all for coming out tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ambroz, so much for jump-starting our Monday night talk series. So,
Yeah.
as Troy stated, we're really trying to get the ball moving and get back into our Monday night regular talk series that we've had such a calling for since